Hello everyone and welcome to Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. We would like to welcome Terry and Jared, who are going to share their story of being placed with their daughter. So welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Talk to us about when you first came to the agency, what made you select Adoptions from the Heart, and what your expectations were about becoming parents through adoption.
Yeah, we had looked at a couple of agencies, and actually good friends of mine from high school used Adoptions from the Heart and adopted 2 children with Adoptions from the Heart. So they recommended it very highly. And we started the process, October of 2021, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, in the heat of the pandemic.
I was going to say, the heart of the pandemic.
Yes. We had a conversation when it was our wedding anniversary, and Terry said, "Are you ready? I think it's time." And it was a long road from there. But I think we both always knew that we wanted to be parents, and it just felt like the time was right. We thought it would have gone a little bit quicker. I got a new job in the mix there, and it kind of delayed us a little bit, but we look at it now and say, couldn't have worked out any better.
Yeah.
How about as a same-sex couple coming into our agency, what was your feelings with that, and making sure you chose an environment that felt comfortable for you?
Well, I think that was the key word first and foremost, is like feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
Just recognizing that we are a gay couple, we're an interracial gay couple. That was the very first thing that came to our minds. And we wanted to feel supported in that. And yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that we looked to make sure, like the Human Rights Campaign had made some posts about Adoptions from the Heart, and just really wanted to be in a place that we felt seen and safe. And we had looked at other agencies, and there's a lot of places that, subscribe to a more religious, faith-based. We believe that family is one man, one woman. So we were really excited just to see how many, courses and posts about being LGBT were here, and that's what drew us here.
Yes.
And to see other couples, right,
Yes.
who look like us doing it, and to look at the website and see waiting families who are also gay. That's very affirming and empowering. So we felt from the gate like this, being a gay couple, this was the place to do it.
Sure. It's interesting because we have a lot of birth parents who say similar things, in that they chose our agency because we are non-discriminatory and we have all kinds of families, because that's important for them, whether they chose a same-sex couple or not. Just knowing the values we hold here at the agency is important for them in choosing the right fit. So I'm happy that you found that here, because that's one of our goals in the adoption process. So that's good to hear. Talk to me about your processing before you became actually active in our Waiting Family Profile book. What was that experience like, connecting with your social worker, going through the educational courses, and what that meant for you in preparing?
It's a lot.
It was a lot.
I don't know if we were prepared for how much it would be, especially the courses, the home study. It's a lot, and the mix of all of that, I got a new job, so we decided I need to pause for a moment, get settled in this new job before we do this. So then we had to do a home study update, which is also equally as long as the home study. The courses were great. I loved that they were talking about things like transracial adoption, a lot of conversations that there were birth mothers who joined calls, and we got to hear from them, and I think forced us to have some conversations that we didn't even think about, right? To just talk about relationship with birth mother and to normalize that for your child from the beginning. So I feel
also be able to have conversations with our families too about the process too, because they didn't know very much about it. So we had to educate them, in addition to ourselves. And yeah, what else?
Yeah, and for us, open adoption was always it. My cousin was adopted from China, and it was a closed adoption. We had a lot of conversations with her just about how important it was. And I would say too, I think that we came here wanting an open adoption, but I think this taught us so much more about what that is, what that looks like, and I think it opened us up a lot to what that means.
Yeah, and on average it takes folks anywhere between 4 to 6 months when they're going through the application, the ed course phase, the home study assessment part, learning how to create a profile. That takes time, and I appreciate you being honest of saying it is a lot. It is. You are correct. But it's important work, because we want to make sure that our families are prepared, they've been assessed appropriately, they're approved for adoption. It's not like you guys just walked in off the streets and we handed you a child. So I appreciate you being honest about that part. for everyone to recognize that this is a commitment that you're making, and it's a commitment that you two are jumping into, as well as your support people, your family, your friends. You mentioned sharing some of the education you received with them, because that's important in trying to prepare and be ready for placement. So I appreciate that you acknowledge that. So you go through all that, you're home study approved, you learn how to create your profile, and then you go into the books. How long did you wait before you got the call?
2 months to the day.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 months to the day. And again, it was just like, we didn't really know what to expect. We did have a situation, or actually two, in which we were presented with, and we just, happened to not be chosen. But when we did get, like the third opportunity, the third time's the charm, we were enjoying, like our usual Sunday outing, Sunday fun day. And then we got back home and, we were just hanging out. We received a phone call and we were just like, we talked about it for probably like 2 minutes, if that. And we were just like, we want to be shown.
2 days later.
And then 2 days later, we, did I get the phone call first?
We got a group text from our social worker.
Okay.
Yes.
And
We like to do that.
Yeah. And it had been about a week since another situation we weren't chosen for, and we got a text saying, you weren't chosen. So it had been more than 24 hours, and I was thinking it was a no. And then that text came through, and I was sitting in the backyard working on a paper. I'm in a doctoral program, and Terry was working in the office, and Sheila just said, "Can you talk?" He said, "I've never run in the house so fast." Before you could read the text, I was in at the office. I was like, "We have to call her right now."
I was like, "Wait a minute." I was like, "I just opened the text. Like, what? How are you standing like right here?" Like,
And then Sheila called us, and she said, "Good morning, Dad." This is the first thing that she said.
Wow.
And we met Izzy the same day.
Yep.
And we're discharged the next day with her. Yeah. The blur of our lives. In the
blur.
best
The
way.
the absolute blur.
I do want to ask you, since you're in this moment, a lot of families will struggle with getting what we call emailed situations, which is what I think you're describing about the 3 situations you were presented with. Just so folks recognize, on a regular basis, families don't know they're being shown because of the design of our program with the profile key. If your key matches, we show you to situations, and you won't know about it until the following month when our match report goes out, and then you're able to see what situations you were shown for. But you guys described situations that were outside of the key, where they had to be emailed and you had to either approve or not approve your profile being shown. But can you talk about what it felt like to say yes to the first 2 situations, and then kind of be let down that you were not selected? Because a lot of our families struggle with that, especially families who have waited several years. It's the constant, like, almost rejection. What that meant for you now that you've kind of gotten over the hump of being placed, any advice you have for folks who may be struggling with the no, we were not selected?
I would say the first one is the hardest, and you it feels like the first time you're getting movement, right? And you've been waiting, and as you're doing that, I felt like I was waiting with bated breath for like a full 24 hours. Like, I paused our whole lives for that time, and you're just like waiting in limbo, right? So it was, I think the first one, and when we got the no, was like a really big kind of letdown, because you're filled with hope, and then it's like, sorry, it wasn't you. The second situation we actually said no to, and then the third was Izzy. And I think in the third one, I felt a little bit differently. I was like, well, I am not going to get our hopes up. The other thing that we decided is the first time we told my mom, Terry's mom, my brother and sister-in-law, my other brother and sister-in-law, and then we realized how quickly, like, now we have to go and make the rounds and say, but it was a no. And we realized how hard that was. So when we said yes to Izzy's situation, we didn't tell anyone but our moms, because we didn't want to go through that every single time telling people and then saying it wasn't a match, because they get excited and they don't know, and people are like, what can I go get for you? And it's like, but we're not there
Slow
yet.
down.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, we're not sure. So my advice to people is like feel it, right? And I think that first one is just really difficult. But then really think about like who you share that with, and understanding that, like, I think we both wanted our moms to be an added layer of support. But then it was also really beautiful to get to like contact our tribe of people when we found out, and they just had no idea it was even possible. So to make those calls was like incredible.
The only thing that I will add to that, I would say, it's important for folks to not get stuck. Like, like Jared said, getting that first email situation, it's like you stand still in time. You're just like, okay, you're waiting to hear. And it's just like, we were let down. We didn't, get the match. And then it was just like, okay, well, like, all right, what do we do from here? And it's just like, well, you have to continue everyday life and, like, not feel stuck or just like, well, like, why not us? You know what I mean? And I just I was the cheerleader and I was just like, hey, listen, like, it just wasn't our time yet, right? And little did we know,
next week it was going to be our
the
time.
following week, it was our time. But I would say for folks who have been waiting longer, is you have to keep going with everyday life.
Yeah. And just kind of remember the basics of it will happen when it's supposed to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you guys had to go through those first two situations that didn't pan out to get to the point of Izzy, right? Who became your forever child. And it is hard. It's exciting, but hard.
Right.
And it's almost like you go through these different hurdles to get to the end, and you just have to be patient with it and recognize that it is a process, and it's never 100% until you're kind of at that end goal is what I like to call it. But you guys hit on a lot of important topics, and I appreciate you talking about family and friends and who to tell and who not to tell, and only you can decide that. But that can be an added layer of stress. And I value that you're sharing that with our audience so that people remember that. Because it's hard. You're in the moment. You get the call. You're excited. You want your family to be included as much as they can. But then you quickly realize, okay, I have to go back and untell them. And that can be challenging.
Yeah.
So fast forward to this emergency placement, which is what we call it when we get the call directly from the hospital. You guys drive to Delaware. You're placed with Izzy. What was that experience like? Did you have any connection to birth parent at that point?
Yeah, so, I think we got the call at 10 and we were at the hospital at 2 p.m.
Wow, that's a very quick emergency placement.
Very,
On the spectrum of placement, that's probably like, okay, you've got 3 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours.
We were lucky because it was, 45 minutes away.
Yes.
We met with Jacqueline's social worker in the lobby, and she told us at the time Jacqueline wasn't ready to meet us. And then as we were signing the paperwork, she got a text. I guess Jacqueline had walked by and said, I actually think I do. So we met her the same time that we met Izzy.
Wow.
And got to spend a good amount of time with her in the hospital, and then she came back the next day, and we were there for probably 3 hours before we were discharged. So we were there for like a very difficult goodbye, or a see you later, I guess, right? Between Izzy and her mom.
Right. But yeah, it was just like, a mix of emotions because it was, we were sympathetic to Jacqueline and, like the situation. It was a big decision for her, right? But we had to also, kind of contain our excitement. We just didn't, it was a difficult place to just like balance, how you felt.
Yeah.
So like when we were very respectful, and we didn't, say like, hey, can we hold her? We waited until she offered, for us to hold her. And same thing, like with changing or just like, like giving the bottle or anything like that. We kind of took her lead because we just wanted to be very mindful about her feelings.
Sure. And that's really important. And obviously that's something we talk about in like education mode when we're preparing families of like what to do at the hospital and who does what and all that. But until you're actually in it, right, and you're actually faced with the birth mom sitting right there, sometimes it doesn't hit the right way, right? It's great to talk about it, try to prepare, but when you're actually in it and feeling the emotions from that birth parent who just had to let go of their child, you start to see things in a different light. And it's no longer just about me as the prospective adopted parent and my needs and my wants and my desires of this is potentially my child and I want to do A, B, C, and D at the hospital. It becomes, wait a minute, what's the bigger picture here, right? What can we do in this moment to safeguard and protect the birth parent to this child to make sure that this is the plan she actually wants to make, right? And I appreciate that you had the guidance and support of Adoptions from the Heart. Birth mom's social worker was there, present, able to kind of help coordinate some of those probably difficult moments. And I'm just grateful that you had the opportunity to meet birth mom because not everybody has that.
Yeah.
So what type of open adoption have you guys kind of settled on at this moment? in terms of the future?
Well, in our, like, I guess, initial arrangement, we agreed to, 4 visits a year. And we pretty much have open communication between,
direct contact.
Text, phone calls. We're on a group text. And, like, we share photos as well as, like, an update, through our text. We have not yet, like, had a meeting. There was just, like, a situation, Jacqueline was ill during the first meeting, but we're looking to initiate, like, another possible meeting for her.
Can you guys talk about that part? Because 4 visits a year, direct contact, definitely on the other end of the spectrum in terms of what we commonly will see, but we're seeing more of that here at Adoptions from the Heart. More of birth parents requesting direct contact. We live in a world where texting, video chatting is life, right? That's just how we all operate. What would you say to folks who are a little cautious about that? How did you get to the point of being comfortable with having that direct contact and having the potential of 4 visits per year?
For us, I think, like, we've learned pretty quickly, like, it's going to change and evolve. So I think that we always knew that would be a goal, that we would want to have direct contact. And I think a lot of it was, respect for what her wishes were. Like, again, this is so hard to let go and to feel like you're communicating through the agency and you only get so many updates. I think it was good for her in those first couple of days to be able to reach out and check in and how are you doing. I think at the same time, like, it does give you a little bit of fear, like there's that waiting period, right? So like those 14 days for Delaware, like, she has every right to change her mind. And that can be really, really difficult. So, like, balancing those feelings with like having that direct communication. But I think it feels pretty natural. Like, I think, again, I think we're just used to directly communicating with people that way. So it feels nice to be able to just, send a bunch of, videos or photos and a little update. And then I think also recognizing that we're also building a relationship with Jacqueline, right? So that's going to look different as it does right now, as it does a year from now. And I think we've reminded ourselves that, like, that's going to be a process of its own. And it feels more organic and authentic, I think, to have direct contact to build that relationship than kind of having to do it a different way.
Right.
Totally. And that's exactly what we try to explain when we're talking about future contact, the idea of healthy boundaries, because there should be boundaries in place to a certain extent for all parties involved. But you hit on such an important topic of, like, letting it organically build. And sometimes it's just easier to do that when you have that direct contact. And it's not to say that the agency is not here for you. We're always here for you. If down the line, 5 years from now, you guys have a moment of struggle where maybe there's some question over communication, you can always reach back out to us and we can help guide the communication. But like any relationship, it takes time to build that, right? And if there's constantly a middleman involved in that line, sometimes that just can do more harm than good. So I appreciate you welcoming in this idea of direct contact, because we are seeing that more and more here at the agency. And it's something people really want to think about when they're thinking about their future adoptions down the road. Because it is a comfort level, specifically for birth parents, to know that they can quickly text you, know that you're available, again, with the boundaries. It sounds like the birth mom is not super invasive or anything like that with you guys. Any other advice you would have for folks who are struggling with that?
I think it's also just recognizing, like, we, in one of our post-placement visits, we talked about this with Sheila, our social worker, just saying, that first visit didn't happen, and also respecting the fact that what a birth mom might ask for in the moment, right, might look different, or she might say, like, I want 4 visits a year, but might not be ready yet. So I just think really keeping the lines of communication open, but also understanding that, like, there's a lot of feelings happening on that end too, and it might be hard, and they might not be ready yet, and that's okay. And Sheila gave us some really great feedback about, maybe that's when you do a FaceTime visit, or something smaller, like maybe it's not lunch, maybe it's we'll get coffee really quick, right? And just, I think also being open but deferring to, birth parents for what they feel comfortable with, because that could also shift for them from the moment of birth until 3, 6 months, 9 months from placement.
And even years down the road, we had an adoption where it took 9 years for this adoptive family to continuously send pictures and letters. They had no visits, the birth parent was just not ready for it. But when I tell you that this adopted mom, she, every single holiday, at yearly, everything, she was sending those updates in there. And she always reiterated at the end of her letters the commitment, and when you're ready, we will welcome you in with open arms. And eventually the birth mom did come around, and she decided to have those visits, and that adopted mom was just so happy. And I just felt like it was because of her commitment to that child that she did that continuously, that the birth mom eventually came back around. And how beautiful that they could then have that contact, right? Because open adoption does not always look the same for everybody, and that's okay. But being respectful of the birth parent and what they're going through is an important layer to understanding it. So I appreciate you guys sharing that. Talk to us about being a multiracial family, and what that means for you when you go out in the community, two dads, all that, just what your experiences have been like as a family.
Well, I feel like it's an evolution, right? You know, it's I feel like when we first went out, like we were probably on pins and needles, like, okay, we have a little baby, you know, we are a black and white couple, like, you know, our baby, I guess, like, what, you couldn't, I mean, she's, what, fair skinned, like,
yeah, I mean, she's biracial, but
she's
like,
biracial.
I think people would say maybe a little racially ambiguous.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's just like, okay, well, all right, well, what are people gonna think about two men walking around with, you know, like a baby? And I remember, like, we had our first family outing, and, you know, someone looked at us and said, well, what did she say?
She said, she's so cute, does she belong to you all?
Yeah, is she y'all's? And we were just like, well, we're like out at a place, at a restaurant, or, you know, like, and we're out at a restaurant in public, you know, just the two of us at a table. We're just like, well, who else is would she be, right? Like, we didn't just pick her up off the curb. So I mean, it's just like those moments sometimes where you're just like, okay, well, you have to balance out people's curiosity with just like, you know, what?
Like deciding, do you want to like educate in that moment, or do you want to just answer the question and move on? Do you lean into it? I think we also, like, you know, we live in the city in a very diverse neighborhood, so in some ways that's like helpful. A bit of a bubble.
Right.
So then when we go other places, I think there's just this like hyper awareness, and I think we had that to an extent, just the two of us, right? Like, where do we travel, where do we go? But then when you add a child to the mix, you get a lot more people staring, or just, you can tell they're trying to place like, what's the dynamic and what's going on there. And sometimes that's out of pure, like, beautiful curiosity. And there's been moments where it feels really good to be automatically seen as a family. Like, we've been out at a restaurant other times and someone said, you're such a beautiful family. Like, not even having to just like, what's going on
explain
here.
The
Yeah. And I think it's just, I think we live on the, you know, a little bit of pins and needles of like, or when we go out, are we gonna have to,
do we have to be on defense mode?
Yeah.
Or just like, you know, do we have to, you know, come walk in the door with our, you know, like fist up in the air? Or is it just like, you know, it's gonna be like a warm welcome?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we're gonna forever live that way, but, you know, it'll just be how we manage it.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is, like, I think we've already had a lot of conversations about this and thinking, like, right now when those things happen, Izzy's not aware.
Right.
She doesn't know. But before too long, she's going to see and hear those and absorb that. And I think we've already started thinking about, like, we have to model a response to help her see how we respond to that, but also recognizing the feeling of, like, it will be challenging to feel like you always have to, like, not maybe defend is the word, but like defend, we are a family. Like, we're a family who loves each other, and just because we might get asked that question a lot, like, here's why people ask that, and here's how we respond. So I think we're trying to think about how we respond now, even though she's not aware, in a way that we will continue to respond that, like, she can be proud of, right? But there are some moments where you're just like, and I think those are the moments you're like, I just don't have the time today. It's just like, yeah, she's ours, and you move on. And there might be another moment similarly where you're like, yeah, we adopted her, right? And you want to share a little bit about that process.
This reminds me a lot of the 4 wise choices that they teach folks in preparing to become parents. In certain moments, you may choose to walk away, right? That's the W. I is inform, S is share, and E is educate.
Mhm.
And you have to kind of decide in different moments who's around. Is my child around? Are we talking to a stranger at the grocery store versus the doctor, right? Who maybe you do have to inform a little bit more. Being conscious of what your child hears you say and how you respond, because you're now eventually going to teach Izzy how to respond, and she's going to have her own wise moments of deciding when in those times that she should share versus not, and what is her comfort level with that. And you may be comfortable with certain things, but she may not be. And as she grows up, you'll take your cues from her too. So it's kind of just an interesting dynamic and different layers that are brought into it. But you guys seem very prepared for it. You're already having those conversations, and that's what we are hopeful for at this point. But it is something to recognize and something that people don't really think about, of just, oh, you're building your family, you're becoming parents, everything's just wonderful. It's not always that way. Maybe some added things that you have to think about.
Right.
So good to hear. Any final thoughts for other families who are looking to adopt? Just some advice you have, something you want people to know about your story?
Well, yeah, I would add like one thing that I was grateful for, and going back to, like the previous discussion, is that during our process, we were going through our, oh my God, what's the form? The
profile key.
The profile key, and we got to the section where we had to identify race, and in order for us to be able to select a biracial baby, we had to select white or and or black or whatever other ethnicity we wanted to choose, race we wanted to choose, and Adoption from the Heart was receptive to me having concern around, or being placed potentially with the white child, or presented with a situation with the white child, and post George Floyd and everything like that. It just probably just in pure existence, right? I was just very hyper aware of potentially being a black man and traveling alone with a white baby potentially. So that was a topic that I had, brought up, and I was just like, hey, listen, I am not sure if I'm 100% comfortable with that, and here's the reason why. So Adoption from the Heart, and oh my God, what? Sheila, thank you. Sheila was very, open to hearing me, around that, and she was like, we haven't been presented with a situation like this before, so we hear you, and we want to recognize your feelings and your potential experience. So we were given an exception in order to not have that as a condition for our profile key. So I want to I'm very thankful that we were provided that opportunity.
Yeah. No, and I think you hit on a good point of our agency is always evolving, and we are always changing policies and procedures. We're very much about advocating for our clients and their needs, and then hearing you out and trying to decide as an agency what we will be allowing versus not, and then sometimes exceptions are made for certain circumstances. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's not just always one way. And over time, who we are today is very different than who we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and we'll probably be very different a couple of years from now, right? Even the designing of the profile key in general, that's constantly changing based off of the need and what we're presented with amongst our clients. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Absolutely. Any other final thoughts?
The only other thing I would add is to remind yourself that two things can be true at the same time. There's space to hold two feelings, and I go back to kind of what you said, in the hospital. It's okay to be really excited to leave the hospital because you're about to start your life and being a parent, but at the same time, your heart aches for this person who's letting go, and there can be space to feel both of those things at the same time, and you don't need to feel guilty for feeling the excitement, but to be mindful of you can feel really sad at the same time, and I think normalizing that for people, it can be both and.
And sometimes people really don't get that when they initially come into this process of building their family, because you are focused on yourself and your needs and your desires and building your family and becoming parents, but it takes going through those moments and recognizing the hardship on others to fully come to that conclusion. And that may continue for you. You may have moments where you have visits with birth mom eventually, and again, you're excited to share and have her see Izzy, but then you also see the sacrifice, the loss, the pain that she may be going through. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I always say that when you come into this space of adoption, whether you're an adoptive parent, a birth parent, a social worker, you just have to come in with an open heart. Because there really is no one way of approaching this, and you may be feeling some type of way about what this may look like, and then it completely changes, right? I've been doing this for 12 years now, and every day it's something different, and I'm like, oh, didn't see it that way yesterday, but now because of this case or this situation, I'm looking at it in a different perspective, right? And just trying to be as unjudgmental as you can, or non-judgmental, excuse me, not putting any pressure on yourself of what the expectations should look like, because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with emotions, there's different layers to adoption, and you want to be respectful of that and allow yourself to kind of gracefully go through it. So we appreciate you guys sharing your story.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I mean, it's always wonderful when our community can hear directly from the folks who have been through it. We can talk all day long about adoption as staff here at Adoptions from the Heart, but just hearing the personal moments that you went through will hopefully help others who are looking to embark on the same journey.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
so
thank
thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Continue to tune in and witness amazing people like these guys. Thanks so much. Take care.